It's Leigh with Arts Council OKC Creative Aging Program. And today we're going to do watercolor animals and we're going to do the wet on wet technique. And so it's going to be really kind of loose painting technique, so not a lot of crisp detail. So it'll be kind of fun and different for some of you. So materials you're going to need is just a pencil, a regular pencil, nothing fancy, watercolor paper, watercolors, various sizes of brushes, and paper towels for blotting, and water, of course. So let's jump right in. And then I'll explain a little bit more here in just a sec here. All right. So let's see. I can arrange them in here so you can kind of see them. Let's see. So basically what we're going to do is you're going to start out with just a really, you don't have to put in a lot of detail of your animals. You can just do, even just a suggestion. This one I did just to kind of basically show you how it looks. Just basic shape of animal. You can use anything you like. You don't, and just kind of keep it light. Now we're going to leave the pencil lines on these images just because that's kind of what keeps them interesting, at least in my opinion. And we're going to wet the paper first with a larger brush, and then we're going to focus on, you could do it either way. You can do the background first, or you can do the animal first. I think today we'll probably just do the animal first. We'll start with the inside and then work our way out. And you can pick your colors that you want. These are kind of a little more wintry tones. You can also have totally bright, sassy colors. It's up to you. And and this is really just kind of fun with it. This is a different kind of technique that, some of you may be familiar with and some of you may not be. But we're going to do the whole thing in wet on wet, and you're going to have to let you're going to have to let your paper dry a little bit, and you can use the paper towel in the process. Not a paper towel. Well, you can blot, but then what I meant was a hair dryer to help you dry your stuff a little bit faster. So let's see. I've got a rabbit here, and I've just got the basic shape of the rabbit, and rabbits are nice and fuzzy and fun, but we're not worrying about too much of the detail. I just wanted to make sure I have all the body on here, little feet, and the ears. Okay, I'm going to take this size brush, and I'm going to dip it in. You want probably a decent sized flat brush to do this with. So we're going to wet the whole paper just with water. So what I'm going to do is dip in here and just kind of, you don't have to be very specific. You just want to get water all over your paper. And I have a paper palette underneath my paper. Now, if you have a plastic top table or whatever, that's fine. So now what I'm going to do is, paper. So you're going to have to kind of keep your finger on it. The nice thing about watercolor is it will wash off real easily, and it won't get on your hands, or if it does, it washes off. So what we're going to do is figure out what colors you want your animal to be, and I'm going to switch out for a little smaller flat brush. So I'm going to, let's see, and now also in this, make sure that whatever you want to leave white, make sure you leave the paper showing. Okay, I'm gonna start with some brown. Now I'm just gonna kind of push it. I wet my brush, but then I also am just going to move my brush around here and kind of make sure that if there are areas that you want to keep white, that you rinse your brush off and pull it off. And now don't worry about it kind of going over, the edge, okay? I just kind of want to have some spots on my little rabbit today. And so I'm just kind of moving my brush around. Now because the paper is so bowed, it's gonna cause some issue, but just put your hand on it and hold it down. It's gonna be okay. Now I kind of got a little carried away, I think, with some of the brown, so I want to come back. And then in this instance, I think I'm going to take my paper towel and just kind of blot it because it's kind of going out of control. Now, one nice thing is if you have a larger piece of paper, you can still do a smaller image on a larger piece of paper. So my paper is a little crazy wet, so it's okay. I can still come back and do this. So anyway, since the paper is bowing so much. Right, so I made an adjustment in that if you have really thick watercolor paper, you'll be fine. This is a little thinner than I normally use, so that's hence the super, bendy bit. So what I've done is I kind of blotted it off, and then I put blue tape, painter's tape loops on the back, and I've stuck it down here. So now when it gets wet, it shouldn't curl as much as it did. And a little bit of curling is fine, but extreme curling makes it kind of difficult. So when I wet the paper again, I'm not going to wet it as much because it's still kind of damp. So anyway. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to just kind of do some background. So I like to keep it pretty fluid, and I'll still have the brush wet. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to push away from the rabbit, and I'm just going to bounce the brush around. And it's okay if it kind of gets in the area of the rabbit. And I'm going to add some purple in here too because I like it. So you don't have to do wild colors. I just like it. And you can tell that because I blotted the paper, I didn't get as much water back on there, but that's okay. So just kind of have fun, and this is a really loose technique, so that's the whole point of this exercise today, is just to kind of experience something new. So I'm pushing away from the rabbit so that it's going to try to run as least amount into the animal. Okay, and then I'm just kind of, and I kind of like the idea of having a little bit of white in the background. Okay, and then let's see. We can have some grass down here if you really want, or you can just have your rabbit floating in the air. It's totally fine. And this is, obviously stylized grass, so I'm just gonna bring it. And this is a small piece of paper, so if we had a larger piece of paper, we could really just kind of have fun and see how the color goes. But you can see how I'm just kind of bouncing it around, okay? And then if there are areas that you really, kind of want to bring some stuff back out or kind of add a little cloudy bits, then you can kind of blot it. And with your paper towel wadded up, it kind of adds a little bit of a texture. Now, I wouldn't recommend with where you were with the purple on the paper towel putting it down here because it can sometimes transfer. So, okay. And now this will dry some, so obviously it'll dry. It will lighten up when it dries. And then you can kind of add in more. But I kind of just wanted to get some color in the background. So, and I wanted to kind of pull some of that paint off, so I just wet the brush and then kind of blotted it, and then I'm moving some of it off, okay? And then we'll add some more in here later, but now what we want to do is focus on doing the rabbit. Same kind of thing. Now remember though, since you did your background first and it's still pretty wet up here, you really don't want to be up in that area unless you take the time to hit it with a hairdryer. And I probably, and that sometimes is a great idea. Now, if you're really trying to go for really loose, where it just kind of expands out into the background, then you don't have to worry about it. But we're going to focus more in here and kind of worry about getting up close to the edges in a little bit to give this some time to dry. Okay, so I think we're going to... And then really kind of keep it on the really light side initially. Because when I first did it, the brown got dark really fast. So I'm just going to kind of come in and just do a little bit. And I've got quite a bit of water on my brush and quite a bit of paint, but I just kind of blotted some of it off because I don't want to do what I did just a minute ago. Okay. So you're creating shapes with your brush and color. And I'm just kind of following some areas on the rabbit drawing that I have here, but you can deviate from it. But there are certain areas that I really do want to keep white, so just make sure you can see that, where you're working, because you can accidentally go out into the background where you don't want to be, so just kind of have an idea of where you want to go. And then remember, you can always add more paint and color, but the point of the wet on wet is we're just kind of using the water and the paint as just kind of letting it flow. So we're kind of using the brush differently than we would normally. We're just kind of pushing paint around. And so we're just kind of okay. And so if if you don't have enough water, then you can just put water on your brush and go back and kind of tap things. But I wanted the rabbit to look really kind of spotted, and that's what I'm going for, okay? So you certainly don't have to do that. That's why it looks a little more mottled and spotty, but that's my intention, so. And you can use smaller brushes if you feel you need to. This is, smaller, of course, than the one I was using in the background, but it's still bigger because the whole point is I'm just trying to add some color. And I'm going to bring it up into the, where the background kind of came down into the rabbit, and that's fine. Here again, we're just kind of getting some color in. Now just remember when you're doing this, because it's easy to kind of get caught up in just moving paint around, that really be aware of where you want your white to be, because you don't want to put any paint there. And if this size brush seems a bit big and awkward to you, then switch. Use a smaller one. Now I'm going to use a small, kind of larger round one, but it's different. So I'm just going to kind of come back up and pull some and push something here. And now we'll do the same over here with this here. Like I said, it's fine if it kind of bleeds out, because you're going to be going over this a few times, but And then the thing about brown is, you know, it gets dark really fast, so sometimes you can't come back from that. You can soften some edges, but you can't make white reappear once you have brown everywhere, so. And that's all right. I'm just gonna pull some of this off. And then make sure that when you are if you're trying to take some color up, don't scrub it with your brush. You have a better chance of getting it off in this instance by using your paper towel and kind of knocking back the color this way, because if you start scrubbing your wet paper with the wet brush, you're going to pill your paint. You'll pill your paper and make your paint look a little gross. So, but this is a way that you can kind of tone you know your paint's going to dry lighter, but this way you can already help it along and pull some of the pigment off. So this is a nice start to the rabbit. We're gonna let it dry just a minute, and then we'll come back and start adding the next layer. All right, so what I did is I took this in and used the hair dryer on it so the background would be dry enough so I could start coming back and going over the next layer inside the body. And what I did is I, you know, took a small brush and kind of put in some details of things that I, you know, wanted to put in there. Now we're still going to use some loose stuff in the body and water, but what I kind of wanted to do was certain areas that I kind of wanted to have some different coloring in there. I just am using my little brush and just kind of getting that in there right now. It's going to get covered up most likely, but that's okay. So, but just underneath. And then still I'm going to take my little brush now with a lot of water and just kind of go in and I may need to use a bigger brush. So I'm just kind of coming in and adding some other little details in a different color. So kind of get his arm in here. And I'm still going to keep using lots of water. But then just remember about your white, what you want to keep white. Okay. And you know, if you're done with how, you know, the background and all the internal stuff you think is plenty with the wet on wet, then feel free to just start adding, you know, more distinct detail. But I'm just going to work on this so that you can really see how it comes together if you're really just doing some, you know, all of the steps with wet on wet. So we're just adding layers of color. So this is kind of a golden brown, and then we'll add a little bit of dark brown too, but I just kind of wanted to get in some yellowier colors in here. So just to kind of add a little more depth. And if some of this other stuff looks a little too linear, then you can go back in and use your paper towel and just kind of blot some stuff that you think is going to have a hard edge if you don't want to go back in and push it. So, and then just keep getting water on your brush, and you can blot it a little bit, but I just kind of like going in and I'm just gonna, then I'll go back in with just water and just kind of, and usually, you know, I would go back in and, you know, wet the surface, you know, like what I can do here is wet, you know, where I'm going to paint like the ear. You just want to, there's any number of ways of doing it, so I'm just kind of doing it a little differently on this side where I have a lot of water on the brush and paint. Whoop. But on this side I put, you know, just put water there, and then I'll add a little bit, and it's going to bounce around a little bit more. And if you like that, then you can, that's kind of more in keeping with the body a little bit, but you can create the same kind of effect doing it both ways. So let's do a little brown here. So just kind of take the time to experiment. And the main thing is just go slow, because it's really easy to accidentally go, whoop, I just added a whole lot. So just kind of take your time. And we're going to come down here and bring some gold in his face. But okay. Okay. So I'm just going to add a little water. A little bit of color. Okay. Because once your paint dries, then you can add water to it again, and then you can float some color on top of it. So, and he's definitely looking like a spotty rabbit. So, and if you think that's a bit much, then, like I said, go back in and blot it. Just going to tone it down a little bit. Okay, so the rabbit's coming together. It's you know, it's just slow, as with all stuff. So I'm going to come in here. And then the more detailed stuff you want, your darker stuff, then just make sure you're doing it in the way that you want, as far as because that's really dark. So we're going to come back in and soften that up, because this, you know, I did wet it a little bit, but not a whole lot, because you want your background and your underpainting to have the most wet on wet water effect, because then you want, as the layers, as you add layers to it, then it's going to be a little less fluid the more you come to top, because that's going to be your final details. So yeah, so I'll try to so we're just going to keep going. Okay. And then on the ones that look, so I just put water on the brush, just kind of come back and soften it and move it around. But it's really kind of a fun technique to just kind of add some really nice soft atmospheric feel to it. But it is easy for it to kind of get all out of hand. But the more you do it, the more comfortable you get. You know, and everyone's way of doing it's going to be a little bit different. So just going to have fun. So kind of come in here. Whoop. So now we're going back in and adding some little bits of darker. And really use whatever size brush feels good to you. This, you know, for more of the detail stuff, I like using a little bit of a smaller one. Because you can still move quite a bit of water and paint with it. But for the background and the initial underpainting, I like using a nice big one. And see, on this one I'm just going to, because I know I wanted to keep that bottom part white. This seems a little bit still dark. And then use your paper towel. Your paper towel is a good tool. Okay. So let's see. A little bit. And if you have something in mind initially and then you think, oh, this color is not working out, then don't use it. Just because you know that an actual animal looks a certain way or whatever. It's great to have that knowledge coming in, but then sometimes, you know, depending on how your picture is, you know, your image is telling you how to go. So just kind of art, you got to learn to be flexible, because sometimes what you had intended is not how it turns out. But if you allow the picture to kind of dictate where it wants to go, then it usually has the coolest outcome. Sorry, I'm trying not to lean into the frame too much here. So I'm going to come down in here, find the edge of this. And foot. So, but you see how just, you know, just keep gently going over everything and darkening certain areas, bringing out a little more detail. And you just keep doing it. And if you need to get up and dry your paint, feel free. You know, if your paper is giving you issues, then keep doing that. But then make sure that if your paper is really wet and you're with a lot of paint on it, then don't do it on high, because you'll blow your paint right out of the way. So, and you don't want to undo what you've just spent a lot of time doing. So, okay. And then if it gets like it's, you know, like you're actually defeating the purpose of doing wet on wet, then kind of go back. If it's getting too tight, then just add water and let things float around and soften it that way. Okay. Remember, this is just your just learning new ways of doing things. So just kind of have fun with it. And not every technique are you gonna absolutely love. So just kind of try it out. So, all right, now what I'm going to do is, well, I'm going to let him sit for a minute. I'm going to get a little darker green down in the bottom after I do a little bit right here. So let it sit. And then too, like if you go, well, that brown is still a little bit too thick right there, then soften it with your paper towel, because they're magical. They help a lot. Okay. Alright, so now you can see on the little rabbit, I kept going back and adding some more color. Now, you can be in danger of overworking something, so you want to make sure you kind of stop and pick it up and get it away from you, and or, you know, get some perspective. So, but get to a nice stopping space. And you don't, you know, your rabbit or your animal itself in the interior, it can be really, really loose, you know, or, you know, this fox is really loose and the rabbit is still loose but tighter. The rooster here, you know, has nice details as well. So every animal is a little different. So the main thing is just to kind of have fun with it. And then this panda here is the loosest of all. So it really just kind of depends on what you're going for, and you can actually go back in, you know, with your pencil and add a little more detail in the face if you really want to. I like having the pencil showing, because to me that's just the nature of it. And you know, down in here I went in and added a little bit darker green just to kind of ground the rabbit. But you can also have them floating in the air. It's up to you. So, but just kind of be patient with yourself with the wet on wet, but just kind of experiment and have some fun, and good luck with your animals, and take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.